Ash returns to his estate and slowly opens the door inside. Ida runs to meet him, who calls him my lord and asks, is he not hurt anywhere? He was so worried about all this. Ash, who stands in front of him in clothes stained with blood, looks at him and calls him by name. Ida says he did a great job defeating this wave of monsters. He wants to say that he is impressed by this, but suddenly Ash grabs his clothes and pulls him very hard. He presses him back against the closet, which greatly surprised Ida, and he loudly asks what happened to him. Ash looks at him with a very angry expression and says that he should tell him. Ida does not understand what he means, and in a worried voice asks what he wants to know. Ash again says that he has to tell him. Ida still doesn't understand what he means and loudly asks what he wants from him. Ash, with a very angry look on his face, loudly says that he should stop pretending that he doesn't know anything. What's going on here anyway? No matter how he thought about it, it was too strange. What kind of abnormal difficulty is this? Okay, still training. It was always strange, so he didn't attach any importance to it. Even when the first wave turned out to be living armor, he chalked it all up to his bad luck and forgot. But what was it? On the second level, an enemy NPC suddenly appears, capable of ordering monsters. This has never happened even on hellish difficulty. So he became very interested. Where did this complexity come from? And what was he going to slip into the next level? He pretends to help, but he secretly does something similar. He must answer him immediately. Ida looks at him for a few seconds and says nothing. He tells my lord that he may not believe him, but he is really on his side. This is true. Ash doesn't listen to him, squeezes his throat tightly, and loudly says that he asked a specific question. What is he planning to do next? He is not interested in his excuses. Ida points to it and says loudly that it is a necklace. A necklace he received as a reward for completing his training. If he reflects the third wave, then the functionality of this item will be revealed to him. Once this happens, he will understand what is happening here. Just one level, and then he himself will understand why this is happening. He begs him, like a gambler, respected classic nerd, to overcome all the challenges. He sincerely hopes that he will continue to fight the same way as today, even when he learns the bitter truth of this crazy world. That's because he can't get out anyway. Ash looks at him with a serious expression and asks what he means by saying they can't get out. A small smile appears on Ida's face, and he says that he means he won't be able to get out of this world. At the same time, a girl with white hair and green eyes walks in the dark forest. 3 days passed after the second wave was successfully repelled. Flags flew at half-staff throughout the city. A gloomy atmosphere reigned throughout the city. However, this was not something new for Crossroad. Now is not the time to mourn, because we need to start preparing for the next wave. Tired of the daily routine, Ash and Lucas return to the estate. The system window says that there are 12 days and 9 hours left before the start of the third wave. Ash looks at this with a dissatisfied expression on his face and thinks that taking into account the past 3 days, there are only 15 days left until the next level. Not much, but not little either, if you think about it carefully. At least they will have time to repair the wall properly, and that makes him happy. He looks out the window and his attention is attracted by something he saw there. Near the wall around his estate, the silhouette of a man with a large spear in his hand was visible. It was a girl with white hair and green eyes. She moves very quickly towards the carriage with her weapon in her hand, and Ash at that moment asks, "Who is that standing there at the entrance?" She delivers a very strong blow with her large spear and breaks through the carriage, which greatly frightens the horse. This blow passed next to Ash. He was very scared because of this and loudly asks what it is. The girl was embarrassed by what happened and thinks that she initially only planned to damage the wheel. Some time later, Lucas, with a worried voice, asks His Highness if he is okay. Ash agrees and says that he seems to be fine. Lucas, who was very angry about what happened, turns around and loudly asks who she is. How dare she attack them? For this, she will be arrested, and her fate will be decided by the court. Does she understand this? After he said this, he pointed his sword at her, but the girl with a calm expression on her face stands still and looks at them. Ash looks at this and asks if he really wants to give the child a trial. Lucas, with a serious expression on his face, tells His Highness that one should not underestimate the enemy because of his age. She clearly had special training. Ash asks how did he figure it out. Lucas says he should look at her clothes. This is the Royal Academy uniform. She even has a badge. He raises his voice and asks what kind of behavior is this for an academy student. Who is she and what is she doing here? The girl with a dissatisfied expression on her face tells these old men that she wanted to ask them. This made the two of them very angry, and they asked loudly who did she call old people. Does she have problems with her eyesight? A girl with a dissatisfied expression on her face points to the estate and says that this is actually her house. She had just recently returned, and suddenly there were a lot of armed people whom she had never seen before. How does she know that these are not bandits? Or even conquerors who occupied foreign territories? And then she arrived in her carriage. Anyone in her place would have stopped them and demanded an explanation. Ash says with an angry expression that anyone would use their tongue to do something like that. Why was it necessary to break the carriage? The girl straightens her hair with a smug smile and says that this is a key rule of the academy. In case of doubt, you need to demonstrate strength. This is the only way to take control of the situation. But she didn't want to break the carriage that much. It doesn't matter anyway. They must answer who they are and what they need in her house. The more sincere the answer, the milder their punishment will be. They should choose their answer wisely. Lucas stabs his sword into the ground and says that she should stop saying such nonsense. This estate belongs to the landlord Crossroad. He points to Ash, who is standing next to him and loudly says that he is right in front of her now. The girl asks what is he even talking about. The landlord of these lands is her father. What she just said surprised them very much, and they both understood what it meant. Ash looks at her with a serious expression and says that he understands everything. He remembers Cheryl and asks if her name is Evangeline Cross. She was surprised that he said her name and asked if they knew each other. She points her weapon at him, and Ash says that her father talked about her. He thinks that one glance is enough to understand whose child it is. She looks so much like the Margrave. He examines her, which confused her a little, and thinks that she has eyes like a Margrave. But wait, that SSR rank tank from the game, Evangeline Cross, was a tall and beautiful girl. He understands that she is still young, but why is she so short? Ash uses his hand to show her height, which makes her angry and says that she is very short. He wonders why everything is so different. After all the other characters correspond to their prototypes. Ash walks up to him and quietly tells His Highness that discussing a person's appearance right in front of him is a bit rude. Evangelina trembles with anger. Ash notices this, is surprised, and says that he did not mean it. It's just a small misunderstanding. She grits her teeth out of anger and asks if he has the courage to discuss her appearance right in front of her. Does he consider himself immortal, or does he have an extra life in his pocket? Ash is surprised by this and says that he only has one life. Evangelina says in a dissatisfied voice that then he should treasure this. She takes out her shield, which she holds behind her back and puts it in front of her. She gets into a fighting stance with her weapon in her hands and looks at them with an angry expression on her face. She slowly moves her foot away and says that she has changed her mind. Before, she only wanted to stop the carriage and drop them off, but now everything is serious. A small smile appears on her face, and she runs very quickly towards them, and Ash looks at this and thinks that she looks a lot like her father. He remembers that at their first meeting, Cheryl also attacked him and thinks that she definitely has his genes. Evangeline strikes hard with her spear with an angry expression on her face, but Lucas blocks the blow with his sword. He looks at her with a serious expression and loudly says that she must lower her spear immediately. Does she even know who is standing in front of her? This is Prince Ash, the third prince of the Empire. Evangelina looks at him with a dissatisfied expression on her face and asks, are they so used to stealing other people's property? They don't even disdain someone else's personality. With a very angry expression on her face, she kicks and pushes Lucas's sword hand back. Immediately after this, she swings her spear and loudly says that she would not believe in her life that that same prince would suddenly settle in this place. Who are they trying to fool? She strikes with her spear and moves her shield arm back. Lucas continues to closely monitor her movements and reacts very quickly to this attack. He strikes back with his sword, and this interrupts Evangeline's attack. And Ash looks at them and wonders what is wrong with him living here. She jumps back and asks with a smile on her face that he can do something after all, right? Lucas looks at her with a serious expression on his face and says that of course it is. He is actually a graduate of the same academy as her. He points his sword at her and says that he is number 2 of the 369th graduate of the Royal Academy, Lucas McGregor. And Prince Ash, who is standing behind him, is also an academy graduate. What he said about him surprised him very much, and he thinks, is it true? Did he also graduate from this academy? Lucas continues to point his weapon at her, and with a serious expression on his face, says that, by the way, among the 369 students, the prince was the most legendary. Ash was very surprised by this and asked if he was legendary. He asks with a joyful expression, "In what way is this?" He should tell him more about it. Why is he silent? Lucas is about to say something, but stops because Ash asks if he's become famous for something bad. Lucas begins to worry greatly about this and loudly says that this is not so. Many representatives of royal blood are famous for this. It's just that he avoided studying so independently and bravely that he absolutely deservedly took first place from the end. Ash is very embarrassed by this, smiles with a stupid expression on his face, and thinks that he seems to have just been deceived. Of course, a character like his took last place. Evangelina closes her eyes and asks with a smile, now they are also graduates of the academy? Do they really think it is illegal to cheat on a little girl? They both fell silent and looked at her with a surprised expression on their faces. She grips her spear tightly and says that they should let her introduce herself. A very strong aura begins to emanate from her, and with a serious expression on her face, she says that she is the first place of the 375th issue, Evangelina Cross. She runs very quickly towards them and says loudly that they should let her greet their colleagues. She jumps towards Lucas, puts up a shield in front of her, and swings her spear while he prepares for her attack and holds a sword in his hand. They run after each other very quickly and strike each other with strong blows with their weapons. They face each other with very serious expressions. Ash looks at them from afar and thinks that this is such a spectacular fight. Is it because they are both SSR rank? He admits, the fight between two geniuses is a completely different level. This is very exciting, but at this rate, one of them will definitely suffer. He loudly tells the two that they must stop this immediately. He looks at them with a smile and says that they don't need to fight. There seems to be a misunderstanding. They can just discuss everything. They didn't pay any attention to him at all and continued to fight each other. Ash is very embarrassed that he was ignored and asks if they can even hear him. He looks at them and thinks that it looks like they have no time for this right now. Two knights completely engrossed in battle with each other. He looks at his fist and thinks that in such fights, someone else is needed to get in and separate those who are fighting. And who should do this? He begins to walk towards them and thinks that it seems that a regular attack will be enough. He just needs to break their concentration on the battle and draw attention to himself. A light slap of the glove with random damage should do the trick. He only needs to hit it very lightly. Ash runs towards Evangeline, is about to hit and loudly warns her about this, which greatly surprised her and made her turn to him. He touches it lightly with his fist and the system window with the jackpot appears. The drum stops and the maximum damage is shown, which is 777 points. The system window begins to glow very brightly with congratulations. Ash is very confused about what happened and asks why everything is happening this way. Evangelina, with great surprise, notices a very bright glow that appeared after his blow. Because of this impact, a very bright column of strong multicolored energy appears. Smoke begins to emanate from Ash's fist. He looks at what happened with very great surprise, and his body trembles due to shock. He thinks this jackpot sucks and looks at the damage that was created by the energy beam from his attack. Lucas looks at him with a very surprised expression on his face and tells His Highness that it was a truly amazing blow. How did he do it? Although he should rather ask. He pauses and looks at Evangeline, who crashed very hard into the wall and lost consciousness because of it. Lucas covers his face, looks at this with horror in his eyes, and asks how he could do such cruelty to a child. Ash says loudly that he didn't want this. Evangeline's shield and spear were completely destroyed by this blow and lie on the ground next to her. They stand still for a few seconds. Ash turns and asks in a worried voice what he thinks. She survived, right? When Evangeline was younger, during monster attacks on the city, her mother always came to her room. Her mother said that she came to make sure that her little girl did not cry in fear because of the monsters. Saying this, her mother always smiled, but even then Evangelina knew the truth. The only one who was afraid was her mother. She turns to her mother and says with a happy expression that she is not crying. Dad always defeats monsters, so why should she be afraid? Her mother smiled because of this and said that she was right. Evangelina later realized that her mother was not afraid of monsters, but that she might lose her husband. And the fact that one day her daughter will also have to go out onto the bloody battlefield. After this, Evangelina suddenly opens her eyes in an unknown room. She looks around and recognizes this place. She silently looks out the window and smells a familiar smell. She lies on the bed and thinks that this is her room. Suddenly, the door to this room opens with a quiet sound. Evangelina is surprised when she notices this and turns around very quickly. She hides under the blanket, and Ash slowly enters the room. He slowly walks towards her and drags a chair behind him, which makes sounds as it slides along the floor. He sits down next to the bed, and Evangelina continues to hide under the covers and doesn't say anything for several seconds. She collects her thoughts, thinks that it is her father, and says that 3 years have already passed. How has he been all this time? Ash doesn't say anything to this, and she says that everything is already obvious, so he doesn't have to talk. Surely he enjoyed hunting monsters day in and day out, right? She falls silent, and with a sad expression on her face, thinks that this is what she wanted to say. Not this, but something more suitable. Ash apologizes to her and says that he is not her father. This surprised Evangelina very much, and she wonders who it is then. She reaches down with her hand and wonders where her weapon went. She notices the bandages on her hand and wonders if she got hurt. Ash says she probably still hasn't come to her senses. Apparently the blow was too powerful. Evangeline turns to him and remembers everything that happened last night. She points her finger at him and says that he is the same old man from yesterday. Ash looks at her with a serious expression on his face and says that he is actually not an old man. Evangelina continues to point her finger at him and asks if he is pretending to be a wretched old man, but in reality, this is what he is like. Ash got very angry about this and asked loudly, "Did she call him wretched?" How many more times must he repeat that he is not old? He calms down and says she should let him introduce himself again. He is Ash Bonhatter Everblack, third prince of the Empire and current landlord of Crossroad. Evangelina looks at him in disbelief and asks if he still wants to continue saying such nonsense. She raises her voice and says that he is a prince. Then she is the great queen of the principality. She asks with a smug expression if he wants to take a bow. But she didn't finish it because she noticed that Ash was showing her some object. She was very surprised by what she had just seen in front of her. She took it in her hands and said loudly that this was the sign of the Everblack royal family. This is impossible. Is he really that prince? She turned her back to him and is shaking because of something, and Ash says that he told her so. Evangelina, with a very joyful expression on her face, leaned towards him, took his hand, and with sparkles from her eyes, said that she was his fan. She is a real fan of His Highness and hopes that he will give her an autograph. Ash was confused by this, but still agreed and wrote her a couple of lines on a piece of paper. He looks at her with suspicion and asks if she really likes someone like him, the main rebel of the entire empire. Evangelina looks at him with a very joyful expression on her face and says that everything is exactly like that. She likes such a crazy idiot. Ash laughed sheepishly and said that of course he was grateful to her, but he was interested. Why is this so? Evangelina covers one eye with her hand and says with a smile that it is because she, too, rebelled against her father. With a joyful expression on her face, she loudly says that, however, he is much cooler, a real fiend of hell. Trash that brings the royal family into disrepute. In general, she ran away from home from her idiot father and entered the Royal Academy on her own. Only it turned out that they were training there all day long. She had to reconcile herself and forget about the rebellion so that she would not be kicked out. Ash looks at her with a serious expression on his face and thinks that he is sure that it was so. She is not just an exemplary student. Evangeline graduated from the Royal Academy in just 3 years, becoming the top of her class, although it usually takes 6 years. She is a genius who has long been ingrained in the history of the Academy. Evangelina says that in general, her environment greatly limited her. The most rebellious thing she could do was not contact her father during the entire period of training. Ash looks at her with a disappointed expression and says that this is a very quiet riot. Evangelina says that, however, then she heard the story of His Highness. Even being the son of the Emperor himself, he was able to become famous as the last freak on his own. And his creativity in changing newspaper headlines every week surprised her. Either a fountain of gold coins or a carpet of precious stones for the entire room. They even made the Emperor faint from pure anger with their actions. It's just amazing and amazing. He is an idol for her, and she looks up to him. Ash is very embarrassed by this and asks if she is really saying this seriously. He thinks it's amazing that despite his bad behavior, he is someone's idol. His character did a good job. His idle life was not lived in vain. He was surprised that Evangelina, with a joyful expression on her face, asked, "Where is her father now?" She enthusiastically, and with a very cheerful expression, says that she wants to follow his example and bring her insidious ideas to life. She hopes he's not hiding from her, is he? Ash looks at her silently for a few seconds and asks, "So she really didn't hear the news?" Evangelina was embarrassed by this and asked what he was talking about. She just graduated and returned from the academy. What was going on here? Ash clenches his fist tightly because of what he has to tell. Evangelina's expression became worried, and she asked if something had happened to him. Ash lowers his head and says with a serious expression that he wants to apologize for not communicating properly and for her having to find out this way. But her father died. After he said this, they sat silently in front of each other for several seconds. Ash says that a few days ago, during a battle with monsters, he sacrificed his life and protected the city again. He died a heroic death. He is a true hero. He wrote down all of her father's achievements and sent it to the palace. He's worked all his life, so he'll at least get the king's medal for honor and bravery. Evangelina says nothing about this and listens carefully to what he says. Ash says that the funeral will be held in 3 days, and they plan to do it with full honors. Evangelina, who was shocked by what she heard, laughed and said that she was just going to be a bad girl, and he ran away like that. He always said that he would most likely die fighting monsters. And now he really is dead. She is silent for several seconds and says that she did not even have time to throw out all her anger. Ash looks down with a guilty expression and says he's sorry for that. He is the current lord of these lands, and he gives orders during battle. He raises his head and with a serious expression on his face says that therefore the responsibility for her father's death lies with him. She can take out her anger on him. Evangelina looks at him and asks, "Is he really the prince she knows?" Ash is surprised by this and asks what she means. She looks at him with a calm expression on her face and says that it's just that the prince she knows doesn't think about others and only does what he wants. He's just an ordinary freak. Ash looks away and says that she should stop calling him that while he's standing in front of her. Evangelina tells His Highness that in any case, she is grateful for his concern. Ash says that if she needs anything, there are servants outside the door. They are at her disposal. He opens the door and is about to leave, but Evangelina stops him by calling His Highness. She says with a worried expression and a smile that she wants to apologize for yesterday. For the carriage and for everything in general. Ash smiles as he looks at her and says that he accepts her apology. He leaves the room and says she should rest. Some time later, a portrait of Evangeline is shown in the system window, and Eider says that firstly, he should know her age. She will turn 16 this year. Ash looks at him and says she is so young. She is 2 years younger than Damien. Eider says that he already knows that Evangeline appears in the game about 2 or 3 years from now. But in this version of events, due to a number of circumstances, it appeared earlier than it should have. Ash, with a thoughtful expression on his face, says that he understands everything. So that's why she's not the same as she was in the game. He thinks that in other words, she appears in the game in about 2 years. In 2 years, it is quite possible to become significantly longer. Children grow very quickly. In the system window, it is written that Evangelina SSR rank, level 35th, is a guest character. Title: Heiress of the Margrave. Specialization: Skilled Spearman. Strength and Endurance 35 points, Agility 30 points, Intelligence and Magic 20 points. Ash thinks that her agility is very high for a tank. But this is to be expected from the best tank in this game. Its characteristics are simply amazing. Not to mention her imbalanced 100% resistance to physical attacks. He notices that the system window says that it has characteristics such as uncontrollability and clumsiness. Ash wonders, has she always had such a characteristic as clumsiness? In the system window, it is written that due to her youth and inexperience, she can sometimes make mistakes. The chance of making a big mistake increases on the battlefield. After gaining enough experience, this characteristic will disappear. Ash was very embarrassed by this, and thinks that, of course, it's good that such a tank appeared ahead of schedule. But with such a characteristic, it could very well ruin everything, which she had already done once. Although this is understandable in principle, because she is 16 years old. She would rather be playing and having fun, and not fighting on the battlefield. Eider calls my lord and asks if he wants to add Evangeline to the main squad. Ash pays attention to him, thinks about it, and is about to say something. Eider asks, so he's not going to invite her. She will be a very strong ally. Ash thinks about all this for a few seconds and says that he wouldn't say he doesn't want it. Is he thinking about getting 2 SSR rank characters at level 3? This is just a dream. He remembers Cheryl telling him that he wants his daughter to get out of here safe and sound and be able to live happily, albeit somewhere out there. Ash thinks that he promised him that he would tell her to live freely, the way she wants. This is the last wish of the Margrave. To spare his daughter from their family's debt, his dying request. Ash says he wants to keep his word and let her choose what she wants. He bites his lip hard and cries, which Eider notices and says that you can't tell from his face. Shouldn't they at least try to keep her at all costs? Doesn't he at least feel sorry for losing her? Ash says that of course he feels sorry. But he will not give up his principles for the sake of profit. Eider looks at him blankly and asks, but isn't that why he was able to beat the game on hellish difficulty? Because he completely abandoned moral principles. Ash smiles and says that if he continues like this, he will never get better. And he wants to be better than yesterday with every new day. Eider looks at him with a serious expression on his face and says that his principles would not turn into a heavy burden. Ash thinks that of course he is not a saint, but he doesn't want to turn into a monster either. Even if in this reality human life is not worth a penny, he would prefer to remain human. Ash says that he should keep an eye on Evangeline anyway. She is just at a transitional age. He himself should understand this. Eider bows to him and says that he understands everything. He coughed and called out to my lord to get his attention. He says what he would like to say about Evangeline's spear and shield. Ash was very surprised by this, looks at him with a worried look and asks, what is it? Eider says preliminary estimates indicate that the items were SSR rank items, a spear and a shield. But both of these items are too damaged to even be recycled. It will be very difficult to compensate. Ash was very shocked by this and wondered if both of these items were SSR rank. Turns out it's incredibly rare and expensive, doesn't it? Eider looks through his notebook and says that they can get new ones. There were some monocores left from the last visit, and they were of high quality. He calls my lord and says with surprise that his face is shrinking. What's happening to him? Ash says that he used all the cores to charge the turret. Eider was very surprised by this and loudly asked what he said. How could he waste such an important resource so senselessly? Ash's hands are shaking very much because of her anxiety, and he asks if he can give her his gloves. How equivalent would this be? Eider disappoints him because it's not even close in value. Ash closes his eyes and ponders all this with a serious expression. He stands up sharply, hits the table with his hands, and loudly says that a detachment needs to be called. They should immediately go after the monocores. He thinks it's time to take another trip to the dungeon anyway. He will definitely be able to find new items for her there. It's not that hard. Sometime later in the backyard of the estate, Ash smiles and says that it has been a long time since they got together. He hopes that they have had a good rest during this time. He looks at the members of his squad who are standing in front of him. Lily cries, waves her hands displeasedly, and asks, why should she go with them again? She pulls Ash by the cloak and says loudly that he said that he recruited new people. He could have taken them with him instead of her. He tries to snatch the cloak from her hands and says that he really recruited new people, but they are ordinary mercenaries. He thinks the problem is that they are all N rank. Maybe they will improve over time, but adding any weaklings to the heroic squad can be fraught. Lily shakes Ash very strongly with her hands, who thinks that if there was someone very strong among them, he would not worry at all and replace her at the same moment. But unfortunately he cannot. Evangelina comes to them and attracts their attention by asking, why are they gathered here? Ash heard this and turned to see her walking towards them. Lily stopped shaking him, looks at Evangeline and asks His Highness, who is it? Ash points at her and says that most of them are probably seeing her for the first time. They must meet. This is the only daughter of the Margrave of Cross, Evangeline. Damien and Lily lowered their heads in front of her with sad expressions on their faces. Jupiter hits her chest with her fist and says she's sorry for her loss. Evangelina, with a calm expression on her face, shows the same gesture and says that she is grateful for the concern, but she is fine. She turns to Ash with a joyful expression and asks where they're going to go. He says they will go to the dungeons. Evangelina asks where they will go if there seems to be nothing underground here. She asks with a surprised expression on her face, is there really a dungeon under the lake? Ash asks, so she knew about it. Evangelina says she thought it was all a lie. She heard rumors that someone tried to go there, but no one came back. She smiles as she says it and escalates the situation with a smile. Ash smiles while looking at her, agrees and says that no one returned except them. Evangelina looks at him with a dissatisfied expression on her face and asks, does he mean that there are really underground tunnels here, which even her family, who has owned this land for several generations, knew nothing about? And His Highness even managed to go there and back a couple of times. Did she understand everything correctly? Ash jokes with her with a smile and makes her very angry by pointing and talking at her. That her family might have known, they just didn't tell her. He thinks that she ran away without having time to really acquire the knowledge necessary for an heiress. So if the secret about the kingdom under the lake was passed down in her family, she simply wasn't old enough to know it. He turns around, waves his hand at her, and says that she doesn't have to believe it. That's her business, and it's time for them to go. Evangelina says loudly that she also wants to go there. Ash was surprised by this and loudly asks, what did she say? She points to herself with a smile and says that he should not look down on her. She is the best graduate of the academy in her year. She's willing to bet that her fighting skills are far more useful than anyone else's. Ash says that may be true, but he doesn't have time to finish because Evangelina says that if there really is a whole dungeon hidden under the lake, then she wants to see it with her own eyes. She is now the sole heir of the Cross family, and both her parents fell in battle with the monsters that crawled out of the lake. She seems to deserve the right to know. Ash looks at her for a few seconds with a serious expression on his face and thinks that this is actually why he doesn't want to involve her. Because her late father wished it so. He asks, can she handle this? How does she even feel? Evangelina makes a gesture with a joyful expression on her face and says that she is completely fine. Ash asks what about her feelings. She asks what does he mean. He asks, has she already cooled her head for this? Evangelina silently looks down for several seconds and with a serious expression on her face says that she is afraid that if she sits and does nothing, she will go crazy. It will be better if she does at least something. She raises her head and asks with a determined expression, will he take her with him? Will he take it? Ash agrees to this and thinks that he cannot refuse her forever. Lily looks at him with a very happy expression on her face because of this opportunity, and he felt it. Ash is about to say that in this case, she can stay, but does not have time because Lily immediately began to rejoice at this. As a result, a regrouping occurred in his detachment. The system window with the squad has changed, and it says that morale does not bend because of an unbending commander. Synergy of 2 knights, the protection of each squad member is increased by 20%. Eider brought a spear and shield and says that he is sorry, But that is all they have at the moment. Evangelina easily spins the spear in one hand and says that she wielded exactly the same weapon a long time ago. This brings back memories. Ash looks at her and thinks that the squad has definitely become stronger. He smiles and says that they should get ready, because it's time for them to move out. Are they all ready? All members of the squad look at him with determined and serious expressions on their faces. Ash surprises Evangeline by creating a portal out of stones and says that he will tell her about the party along the way. They must now depart. She stands still and looks with great surprise at what is happening in front of her. Ash looks at the portal with a smile and says that her colleague will show her where they had a dungeon under the family estate. The system notifies that loading is taking place. They go to the dungeon. Advice: he needs to be careful when dialogue with NPCs. Depending on his choice, they can either help or harm. To use an NPC to your advantage, consider your approach to it in advance. They all go through the portal together and find themselves in a dungeon. The system notifies that this is the first location of a dried-up sewer. Lucas asks His Highness, they have already passed this place, haven't they? Why are they here again? Ash says with a small smile that it's because they have a new girl on the team. He wants to test her ability to work as a team in a simple location. Lucas asks if it turns out there will be monsters here again. Ash agrees and says that's exactly how it is. He thinks that after the defensive round, the monsters in the dungeons are reborn again. Thanks to this, you can endlessly receive items and experience for your characters. Since the monsters here are relatively simple for the main squad, they are perfectly suited for leveling up a guest character. Usually, in the case of newcomers, the squad is divided into two groups, one of which goes further, defeating bosses and completing tasks in accordance with the level. The other group returns to already explored areas to increase the level and get new equipment, of course. This division of the group is a classic strategy for conquering dungeons. However, they will not separate. They will all return together and give Evangeline a chance to improve and at the same time work as a team. Why not just leave her here alone? At that moment, she felt very bad and was trying to hold back the urge to vomit. She could not stand it and vomited, and Jupiter tries to help her and asks if she can go further. Ash asks if teleportation made her seasick. Lucas says that young people always get seasick on the road. They can't do anything about it. Evangelina turns to him and with a dissatisfied expression on her face asks, "What is this old fart saying?" She's fine, okay. Lucas gets a little angry about this and tells this young lady that this is very funny. Doesn't she have some problems here? Ash looks at them arguing with each other and thinks that he is actually trying to improve teamwork. But they quarrel with each other. What should he do with it? Sometime after they had calmed down, Evangeline examines the place in which they find themselves and, with a surprised expression on her face, says that it really exists. But how did he know about the dungeon if even she, a member of the Cross family, was not told anything about it? Ash smiles and thinks he knew she would ask this. The good thing is that he prepared the answer in advance. He says he can't tell her everything. However, their powerful emperor probably had reasons for him to come here. Doesn't she think so? Lucas and Evangeline believe him and look at him with surprised expressions on their faces, and Ash thinks that it seems to have worked, and that's good. Although the emperor has nothing to do with it at all. Still, having a title is really nice, and it saves him from many unnecessary problems. In any unclear situation, they can simply pull out the badge and everything will be resolved. Although he has never seen his face, he is grateful to his character's father for having him. They come to a dark corridor and Ash says that they must continue. They must light their torches. Evangelina, with a frightened and surprised expression on her face, waves a torch and loudly asks why it is so dark here. Ash says she should get used to it. Darkness is the only constant thing in the entire dungeon. He hides his wide smile with his hand and says that, however, if she is afraid, she can come back. Evangelina looks at him with a very dissatisfied expression on her face and loudly asks who else is afraid here. This is nothing to her. A system window appears, in which it is written that the progress in cleaning the dried-up sewer is 0 out of 4 ordinary rooms. They all walk together one after another along the corridor and look around. Ash stops and says that now they can see what kind of monsters there are. Suddenly, a huge stone golem activates, rises, and begins to walk towards them. Evangelina notices this and looks at this monster with a surprised expression on her face. Ash also looks at this huge golem that stands in front of him. The system notifies that he must destroy enemies. Dried up sewer room 1. Level 7 stone golem, 4 creatures. Ash looks at this with a serious expression on his face and thinks that this is a very big problem. The good news is that there are only a few of these monsters. However, these are quite strong opponents. Evangeline clutches her spear in her hand as she stands in front of these monsters. Ash looks at her and thinks that she is clearly nervous. He doesn't think she's ever been in a real battle. He claps his hands and says that their enemy has arrived. Should they test their skills? Evangelina runs forward and, with a determined expression on her face, loudly says that she will go first. One of the golems that stood in this room raises its fist and is about to attack her. The monster delivers a very strong blow with his fist, but Evangelina blocks this blow with her shield. She resists this blow with all her might and asks loudly, "Is this a bull?" Immediately after this, she jumps back, but continues to watch this monster. Her shield begins to glow and she asks, "Is this the power of the stone monster?" She uses the first skill, Damage Fix. This energy is redirected into her spear and Evangelina says that it is her turn to attack. She runs very fast towards this monster and says that no matter if it is a bull or a golem, she will destroy it. She hits with a very strong spear and uses her second skill, Damage Return. Ash looks at this with a surprised expression and thinks that now she already looks like the best tank of the game, the real Evangelina Cross. This is the very signature skill, a combination of defense and attack. She runs very quickly to the other monsters who were in this room and loudly says that she will send them to rest too. Ash looks at her and thinks that she locks the damage with her first skill and then releases it with her second skill. Of course, there is a limit to the amount of damage this trick can handle. But this does not make this trick any less imbalanced. At the same moment, Evangelina slips and begins to fall, which she clearly did not expect. The system notifies that this happened due to the constant characteristic clumsiness. Ash was very shocked by what just happened to her. He points his finger at her, turns to the rest of the squad and loudly says that they must help her as quickly as possible. All members of his squad killed one remaining golem with their very fast attacks. Ash thinks that the next entry into the dungeon went as usual. Evangelina, with a dissatisfied expression on her face, loudly says that they should leave her at least one more monster. Ash looks at her and thinks that she is probably trying to make up for the incident with the fall. The system notifies that the first zone, the dried sewer, has been successfully cleaned. Ash smiles and thinks that they did it quickly enough. Not even an hour had passed. The first zone is too easy, it's hard to even call it a workout. He goes and says that now that everyone has warmed up, it's time to move on to a more difficult area. They should rest a little and move on. He will warn them in advance. It will be harder there than here, so they must be careful. Evangelina is very surprised when she sees the place they came to and asks what kind of place this is. They came to the second zone, which is called the back streets, and Ash, who is standing next to her, says that he does not know this because he himself is exploring this place for the first time. He thinks that he really hopes that they can find some monochores here. It's time to go lower to hell under the lake. They decided to rest for a while before heading to the second area. Although the first zone was relatively easy, it still took some effort to clear it. Ash silently watches Lucas and Evangelina look at each other with displeased expressions on their faces while they eat and wonders, are they serious now? Was he really even going to compete with the child in such things? He turns to Damien and asks how he feels. He tells His Highness with a smile that everything is fine with him and he is not tired at all. Ash puts the gun on the ground next to him and says he should take it. Damien looks at it and asks, what is it? The system notifies that this is a hunting rifle of SR rank, level 25th. Category Magic Gun, attack from 50 to 75 points, strength 5 points, ammunition 10 points. When attacking from behind, there is a 10% chance of landing a critical hit. Ash says it's a magic gun. He thinks he got this SR rank item from the chest in the last room. In terms of power, It is not particularly inferior to a real cannon, only this is a portable option. As a result, they have high damage, but a large spread with extremely low ammunition. Hitting with such a weapon is not an easy task. Because of all these disadvantages, such a gun is not in great demand. But what happens when you give it to a character like Damien? With a 100% chance of hitting, the picture changes dramatically, doesn't it? Ash says he should use it as a backup weapon for now. Damien examines this gun and says that it is much heavier than a crossbow. Ash looks at him with a smile and thinks that he should just get stronger. In the future, he will have to carry 5 or 6 of these guns with him. This is the only way to compensate for the lack of ammunition. He had already given orders to the forge to prepare to work with firearms. In the game, a character can only be equipped with one weapon before going on a hike, but in reality, no one will prevent them from carrying several types of weapons at once. It's against the rules, but who cares? He must forget about the rules and live in the present. Damien thanks His Highness and speaks that he will take care of this weapon. Ash thinks he should be the one thanking him for having the imbalance ability. He begins to rise to his feet, takes his lamp, and is about to say something. He asks if they all had a good rest. Lucas and Evangelina, who are fighting for food, turn around and look at him with surprised expressions on their faces. Ash asks if they are ready to move on. The system notifies that the second zone, the nooks and crannies. Clearing progress is 0 from 4 regular rooms and 0 from 1 boss room. They all begin to walk together through the gloomy streets of this city. Ash turns to the others and says that it is time for them to clear the next area of this underground city. They continue to walk together through the city, and he thinks that their group carefully walked along the alleys that made up most of the kingdom under the lake. Of course, there was not a single ray of light here. When he played the game, the darkness didn't particularly bother him. But when he himself walks and sees only what is a meter away from him, it made him very tense. This is understandable, since this is a hideout for monsters. He never knows from what corner a golem the size of a house might jump out and attack him. The thought alone gives him goosebumps. Suddenly, a one-eyed monster came out to them, which was the size of an entire building. Ash and Evangeline were very frightened by this and began to scream loudly because they saw this monster. The huge monster that got in their way consisted of many mechanisms, and a large amount of smoke flew out of the pipes located on its back. The system notifies that they must destroy enemies. First room of the backstreet location, elite mechanical golem of the 15th level, 2 creatures. Ash looks at this system window and wonders, does this place count as the first room? In this many alleys, it is generally difficult to understand where everything is. A huge golem begins to walk towards them and extends its arm to attack them. Lucas walks towards this monster with a determined expression on his face and loudly says that he will take care of it. After he got close enough to this monster, he quickly pulled out his sword and delivered a surprise blow to this monster's arm. Ash calls his name loudly and says that he must be careful, because this is not the only monster. Suddenly, another huge golem runs out through the building towards them, and Lucas takes notice. Evangelina runs to these monsters and loudly says that she is also on her way. She blocks a very strong blow from one of the golems with her shield. She puts a lot of effort into resisting this golem's attack and asks loudly, "Are these monsters stronger than the ones before?" Ash looks at them from afar and thinks, what's good is that he has 2 SSR rank characters. This is an opportunity to think about a plan while the knights stall for time. Besides, this is his only task in this detachment. Ash turns around, calls out to Jupiter and Damien, and loudly says that they must attack the golem Lucas is fighting first. Ash thinks that he and Evangeline are knights. But if we compare their roles, then Lucas is something between a damage dealer and a tank, and Evangelina is a main tank-type character. If we take into account solely the ability to contain damage, then Evangelina will be stronger. Ash loudly calls her name and says that her task is to restrain this golem. She must only defend herself. She turns to him and immediately agrees. Ash thinks that such size of monsters usually means one thing. There will be few of them. But at the same time, they are very strong. Lucas at this time dodges the golem's attack and strikes back with his sword. Ash looks at his battle and thinks that these monsters also have an elite title, so a one-on-one fight is not a good option at all. It is precisely for such cases that they travel as a single group. Ash calls his name loudly and says that he needs to knock this monster down. Lucas turns to him and says loudly that he got it. He takes a stance, runs very quickly between the legs of a huge golem, and delivers a strong blow to the leg of this monster with his sword. Because of this attack, the monster staggered and knelt. Ash loudly calls out to Jupiter and says that her goal is the armor on this monster's chest. You need to find a mana core under the armor. She immediately channels electrical magic into her hand and says it's very simple. She releases very strong magic that hits this monster. The mechanical golem did not take very much damage, and only a small chink appeared in its armor. Jupiter looks at this with a displeased expression on his face and says that maybe it won't be so easy. Damien holds his gun, uses his ability and takes aim, and Ash says that should be enough. He thinks that their sniper won't need a bigger hole. He looks at the monster and thinks that such a small gap should be enough. He says he has to shoot right now. Damien immediately fires, and a very strong energy begins to shoot out of the barrel of his gun. This magical projectile flies out at high speed, and due to the recoil, Damien was almost thrown back. Ash catches him from behind and loudly says that he has him. He looks at him with a worried expression and asks if he is okay. Damien, who was shocked by this blowback with a confused expression on his face, says that he is fine. What happened to the golem? Ash points towards the monster with a satisfied smile and says that he can look at it himself. Damien sees the huge hole in the golem's body that he made with his shot and says it's amazing. Lucas finally destroys the body of this monster and says that they had to try for this. Ash, with a serious expression, says that it was an elite monster. It is much stronger than ordinary ones. The strange thing is that the difficulty has increased so much compared to the first zone. He thinks that it seems that in the second zone, they will mainly fight with a small number of elite creatures. In other words, all their fights will be boss battle type. Evangelina, who had been blocking the monster's attacks all this time, turns to them with a worried expression on her face and asks loudly, did they decide to rest there? She's actually still blocking here. Ash was very surprised because he completely forgot about it and said loudly that she blocked it all so silently that he almost... Evangelina asks loudly, what does silently mean? This golem will actually break her shield. Ash says in a worried voice that she should wait a little longer. He turns to the rest of the group and loudly says that they must attack this monster faster. After that, he thinks that things were easier for them. Every time the alley became wider, they prepared for the appearance of golems. It was only in the first room that they had difficulties, as they were not prepared for a surprise attack. And a mimic tried to eat him, disguised as a treasure chest. I wonder if he says he walked into this trap on purpose. Will they believe it? He looks at how all the members of his squad laugh because of what happened and thinks that at least he could cheer them up. After some more time, Lucas puts his hand into the dark liquid, which pushes him back out. He hangs on the edge of the roof of the building and says that here the darkness seems to take shape and pushes his hand out. And it is also very slippery and nasty. He turns around and says that apparently this is a sign to follow the path. It's impossible to turn somewhere from the alley. Damien says it turns out they can't really explore anything. He inspects the building nearby and says that all the doors are simply boarded up. Jupiter, who is standing next to him, says that moreover, all these doors are sealed. The spell is powerful, so it cannot be opened by force. Damien asks if maybe someone was trying to hide from what was happening around them. What does he think? Ash says that's not true at all. They are standing in front of the building, and he says that everything outside is boarded up. It seemed like someone really didn't want to let whatever was inside escape. Damien asks what's inside then. Ash looks at this with a serious expression on his face and says that he doesn't know that. But what's the difference? They won't be able to verify it anyway. They leave, and he says they should just move on. Damien, who was delayed due to the fact that he was looking at the surroundings, runs after them and agrees with him. The system notifies that 3 out of 4 ordinary rooms have been cleared. Ash stops when he notices something and asks if this is the next room. They all look around together, and he says that this area is quite extensive. Everyone must stay alert if they don't want to run into an unexpected golem. Evangelina, with a surprised expression on her face, says that there is a fountain there. Although it has dried up, she sees the statue. She shines a torch on this statue. Ash comes up to her, looks at it, and thinks that this statue is wearing a crown, so most likely there is a king in front of them. However, why are the statues on the sides destroyed, but the statue of the king is intact? Damien notices something in the distance, points his finger at it, calls the prince, and loudly says that he should look at it. He points his finger at some light in the middle of the street and says loudly that something is flickering there. Ash looks at this with a worried expression on his face and wonders, is there light in this hopeless dungeon? So also the source is not their torches or lamps. Damien asks, what if there is a person there? Ash turns around and says they will go check. They must keep their weapons ready. After that, they all headed together towards this source of light, which they had found earlier. They all walk together, and Ash thinks that in a city infested with monsters, there is only one thing that scares more than these monsters. And this creature is man. Seriously, who would agree to live here of their own free will? Just some kind of crazy person. Lucas walks with a sword in his hand, and Ash, with a lamp in his hand, wonders if this is an enemy NPC or an ally. Who is there? Any mistake can lead to the end of the game, so you can't relax. He looks around and sees a lot of debris, next to which a blue flame is burning. Ash pays attention to this and thinks that these are fragments of killed mechanical golems. They all see a human silhouette standing in front of them, and they wonder, did this man deal with these monsters alone? This person turned out to be Mumyon, who noticed them and with a little surprise in her voice says that they have already reached here. It looks like they're serious about exploring this place. Ash calls her name and asks if it's her. Immediately afterwards, Mumyon turns to them with an emotionless expression. He asks, what is she doing here? He thinks that even though they already know each other, there's still no point in relaxing. The strange thing is that he has never encountered this NPC in all 742 attempts to complete the game. It's hard for him to tell whether she's an enemy or an ally. Mumyon says he's just walking around and relaxing. The kingdom under the lake is pretty boring if they want to know. She is going to take out something that she is hiding in her clothes and says that, by the way, since they have come so far, she will show them something for their merits. All members of Ash's squad tensed because of this and look at her with worried expressions on their faces in combat readiness. Mumyon takes out a red cloth in which she carries many things. She spread this cloth in front of her and displayed many different things from which a bright glow emanated. She looks at them and says that they don't have to be shy. Come up and choose something. She only has the best here. Ash was very surprised by what happened and asked loudly, is she an NPC merchant? Mumyon says she doesn't know what an NPC is, but she's definitely a merchant. By the way, today there is a promotion. With any purchase, there is a gift. There's also a 30% discount on your first purchase. She points to the bib and asks, so will they buy something? He should think carefully, otherwise he may miss out on the limited offer. The offer is valid for today only, okay? Ash looks at all this and says nothing for several seconds. He sits down in front of her, examines the objects, and asks what she has. Mumyon says that here are the things she found while wandering around the kingdom under the lake. These items are very rare. It is impossible to get it in the human world. He can choose anything. Everyone looks at these goods with great surprise, and Ash thinks that these are really great items. Merchants usually sell high-ranking items, but these ones are of especially high quality. Maybe that's why she's such a rare NPC. He asks how much does it cost. Mumyon says that money from the outside world has no value here. So she charges in magic stones or mana cores. Ash thinks he understands this. Magic stones have always been used for exchange. This can either be sold or used for trading in dungeons. There's just one problem. Every time. How he obtained magic stones, he exchanged it for currency, so now he has none of it. Who would have known that he would meet a merchant NPC so early? It seems that these things that lie right in front of him are out of reach, like the stars. Unless you try to offer the things they got today. He lays out all the items they got today and asks, what can he expect with this? Mumyon looks at all this and says that she will check now. To be honest, these are pretty mediocre items. But in honor of her first purchase, and considering how serious she is about exploring this place, she will allow them to choose one item as a small reward. Ash thinks she is incredibly kind. He leans towards her with a very joyful expression on his face and asks loudly, "Is this true? Can he choose any item from here?" Mumyon is a little embarrassed by his violent reaction and says that she is a person of her word, so he can choose boldly. Ash examines all these objects that lie in front of him and wonders what he should choose. He wants to choose so that later songs of praise will be written for him. Jupiter took one of the items and tells His Highness that she, of course, is not hinting at anything. But if she could eat this 100-year-old ginseng, she would rejuvenate herself by at least 10 years. Ash looks at her and thinks that just for her to eat, they should choose equipment and not food. He greatly disappoints her by saying that he does not understand her hint. Lucas picks up the shoes that give off a purple aura and asks His Highness, "What about these shoes with feathers?" Ash looks at it and thinks that these shoes have a good acceleration effect. He asks, so he wants to run even faster. Lucas refuses and says that it would be more suitable for His Highness. With these shoes, it will be easier to run away from danger. Ash looks at him with a very sad expression on his face. Tears begin to appear in his eyes. His body trembles with resentment, and he thinks that at least he really cares about him. But he is not the main link in the battle, so he will do without it. Damien looks at the other item and asks, "This is an automatic potion brewing stand, right?" Ash looks at this and thinks that an item that creates healing potions at a certain interval is an important thing. Damien says that if they put this in the temple, it will be much easier to heal wounded soldiers. Ash agrees with him and thinks it's good advice. The slow but steady production of healing potions can make their lives a lot easier. However, potions are already sold in abundance in the outside world. It's stupid to waste such an opportunity on this. He turns to Evangelina, who is examining all these objects, and asks what she will say about this. She closes her eyes and says that she is only a temporary member of this group. She's not particularly interested in equipment. The only exception is the high-quality spear and shield that her teacher gave her in honor of her graduation. He said it was currently being repaired at the forge, right? That's enough for her. Ash and Lucas were very surprised when they remembered this and think that they definitely came to find her equipment. Greed completely blinded them. How could they forget about it? Ash leans over to Moomyong and quietly says that they need a spear and shield. She says that she just has one set. She takes out a black-yellow shield and a spear, and the system notifies that this is the Devil of the Spear, SSR rank 35th level. Spear type, attack from 35 to 40 points, strength 20 points, damage to a vulnerable spot increases by 30%. Giant of the Shield SSR rank 35th level. Shield type, defense from 35 to 40 points, strength 20 points. When the wearer directly blocks an enemy attack, the damage received is reduced by 30%. Ash looks at this with great surprise and thinks that this is what he needs. Great design and good performance. Everything would be fine, but it's a kit. In the system window, it is written that this is a Devil and Giant set. When all items in the kit are used simultaneously, the efficiency increases to 50%. Description: has the monster's aura disappeared? Some knight's comrade. Ash thinks that because it is a set, an item without a pair will lose a very good buff. He bites his finger due to tension and wonders what he should do. He can only choose one thing. Mumyon understood why he was worried and said that, as she already said, there is a promotion going on now. With any purchase, there is a gift. Has he already forgotten? He can pick up both items without extra charge. Ash was surprised by this and asked in confusion, "Is this true?" Mumyon hands over the shield with the spear, agrees and says that he can take it. She doesn't need it anyway, and besides, a kit without parts is harder to sell. In return, he must promise to explore this place further and bargain with her when he meets. Ash looks at her and thinks that this strange girl is no longer just a saint in his eyes, but a real god. He looks at her with a very happy expression on his face and says that he will definitely do what she asked, and he is very grateful to her. He thinks, so this is how a beginner feels, who is given good items by a real professional of the game. He immediately wanted to try harder. Ash calls Evangelina, waves his hand at her, and says that this is for her. He thinks that now he can finally confess to her what happened to her things. About how it is broken to pieces and cannot be repaired, and that this is compensation. Evangelina looks at him with a blank expression on her face and says that she started the fight herself, and he was just trying to stop her. Even if her equipment was damaged so badly, the responsibility for it was hers. He didn't need to. Ash smiles as he looks at her and says that then he can consider it not compensation but a gift. He surprises her by handing her a new spear and shield and telling her that she should just take it. When her colleagues give her gifts, she just needs to say thank you. She should look at how great it looks. She may consider it a graduation gift from the best prince of the empire and also her idol. She's not going to refuse a gift from a member of the royal family, is she? Ash remembers Cheryl and thinks that this is also a tribute to Margrave Cross, who sacrificed himself for the city. Of course, this does not compare with the reward he deserves, but he cannot leave his daughter with broken equipment because he has a conscience. Evangeline blushes a little, silently examines it for a few seconds, thanks him and says that she will take care of it. Ash says she shouldn't thank him. Dissatisfied Jupiter loudly asks His Highness, what about her? Where is her gift? Ash says he already pays her generously. He thinks that he is tired of her. In the future, he is going to buy her many items to enhance her magic. Is it really that hard to be patient? Lucas, with a sad expression on his face, asks the prince, what about him? Ash says that he recently gave him the armor. He wonders, maybe it's contagious. He is already constantly working to improve their equipment. Damien tells His Highness that he is not mad at him. Ash wonders if he is really at the same time with them. He recently gave him a gun, and it's actually very expensive. Jupiter gets enough of the crystal and says that she wants to buy ginseng. Is that enough? Mumyon agrees to this deal, and Jupiter says with a very evil smile that if she just eats it. She doesn't finish the thought, and Ash, surprised by what happened, wonders where she got this magic stone. Mumyon packs his things back into the cloth, and he asks if he can ask her something. She agrees and says that he can ask. If she knows, she will definitely answer. Ash asks if she knows the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Mumyon looks at him and asks who is this? He says he looks like a bard, with a pointy black hat and mask. He plays the flute and seems to control the monsters. Mumyon thinks about this and says that there are many strange people wandering around the kingdom. But this one is especially famous. She knows him. Ash thinks that he wasn't that great of an NPC in the game. Is he really a famous person here? Mumyon points and says that if they continue straight ahead, they will find a large camp between the 3rd and 4th zones. It's safe there. In fact, there you can meet most of the intelligent creatures that wander around the kingdom. This is also called the main camp. Ash smiles and wonders, did she say main camp? He knows this place too. This is a safe zone accessible after completing the 3rd zone. There are a lot of different NPCs there. You can collect quests and partners. Mumyon says that maybe they will meet who they are looking for there, or someone who can tell you how to find it. Even if this is not the case, they will at least be able to gather more information from others. She looks at him and says that she thinks they will get there easily. She leaves and says that they will meet again, if they survive, of course. Damien says that a merchant in such a place is very interesting. Lucas looks at Mumyon as she walks away and says he doesn't trust that woman. Ash turns to him and asks why. He tells him that she is too strong. They continue to walk further and he asks, isn't it strange that she is playfully destroying golems and says that she is relaxing like that? Ash thinks it's not very strange. He could do that himself after leveling up to the maximum level and collecting a full set of equipment. For this reason, he tried very hard in the game 3 years ago. Although from the outside she may seem like a monster to someone. But personally, he would classify her as a friendly NPC type. A bad person would never give him a set of SSR rank items for next to nothing. He claps his hands and says that none of this matters. He turns to them and says with a smile that the boss has been waiting for them there for a long time. He thinks the next room is the boss's room. Ash looks at the system window, which says about the number of rooms in this zone, and thinks that it's time to kill the boss and finally get the treasure chests. They all enter the destroyed door of one of the buildings together. They all look at this broken door, and someone says that it feels like something has made its way out. Ash agrees and says that this something didn't even feel this door. He doesn't even want to imagine what kind of creature it is. But soon they will find out. In any case, they can only go forward. Evangelina looks at this with a worried expression on her face and says that she doesn't want to go there. Damien supports her and asks if they should go back. Ash turns around with a smile and tells these kids that they should be quiet. He didn't come all this way to leave before the boss's entrance. They must go in there. He walks ahead and wants to say something about this place, but pauses. He looks around this big building and says it looks like a dump. They all look around and one of them says that there is a whole mountain of all kinds of garbage. Lucas, with a torch in his hand, says that it stinks here. Everything is covered with mold and something like moss. Apparently this place had been underwater for a long time. He turns around and asks how could there be water here. Ash asks what he thinks if they are now under the lake. He is not at all surprised by this. Damien points to something with a very trembling hand, and in a frightened voice tells His Highness that he should look there. Ash asks him what is there. Damien points to a huge mechanical golem lying in the rubble and says that there is something there. Ash was very surprised by what he saw there and asked what it was. So it wasn't just a pile of garbage? The system notifies them that they must defeat the boss. Backstreet's boss room, giant mechanical golem of the 20th level, Scavenger Bambulak. Ash was surprised when he looked at this system window and thinks that it is the person's name again. Like that time with the boss rat in the first zone, he has the same name and position as a person. What is the reason for this? The huge monster begins to slowly rise and says that he has fallen asleep again. Its core and I begin to emit a bright red glow, and smoke emerges from the pipes on its back. Bambulak directs his hands at them, in which strong energy for a shot is concentrated, and he says that he still needs to take out the trash. Bright rays of light shot out from the golem's hands and quickly rushed towards them. Someone from the team warned His Highness about the danger, and Lucas and Evangelina began to repel the attacks with a sword and shield. The rays of light were reflected to the side, and upon collision with the wall an explosion occurred, and Jupiter, who followed this, said that this was ray magic. This kind of magic is rare. She turned to His Highness and asked how he would order to act. He smiled and said that he needed to think about it. He thought that of course it was a little bigger than he expected, but he knew exactly how they could defeat this golem. Although in this game, in principle, there is no opponent whom he has never killed. He shouted to the others that his size should not frighten them. And he is easy to kill according to the same principle as the previous ones. They just need to destroy the core. However, such a giant will have several of these cannonballs on its carcass, near the bends of the elbows, in the claws, thighs, feet, chest, and head. A total of 10 monocores. Evangelina exclaimed in surprise, 10 pieces? Lucas asked, so he is able to fight until they destroy them all. Ash confirmed their words with a smile and said that there was one important point. After destroying one of the golem's cores, the underlying area will turn off. Let them start with his claws. Jupiter smiled and replied that she understood. Damien took aim with his gun and said he would take care of the right arm. After this, Jupiter and Damien together struck and pierced the golem's claws, from which he could no longer use them. The golem stamped his foot and the core lit up brighter. Hot steam began to come out of the golem's pipes, and Ash told the others that now they need to hit the legs. He called out to Lucas and Evangelina and told them to work on the thighs. Having heard the order, they rushed forward, and Bambulak said that his back hurt so much. He swung his broken claw and said that he had been taking out trash all his life. Seeing this, Ash was surprised and thought, is he attacking with his broken arm like a club? After that, the golem sharply hit the ground with its broken arm, but Lucas and Evangelina managed to jump to the side. Ash mentally praised them and thought it was a great maneuver. He covered his face from the debris that scattered to the side after the golem's strike and thought that he was strong, but the movement was too sweeping. Evangelina swung her weapon and shouted at the golem that he was a piece of trash. She used the skill of reflection, returning damage, and while jumping, delivered a precise blow to the core on the monster's leg. Lucas also did not lag behind. He looked decisively at the monster and said that he would not give in to her. He rushed forward and pierced the golem's leg, affecting the core. His legs broke into several pieces and he fell to his knees. He reached out to them with his broken hand and said that he so wanted to go to the academy and study magic. Instead, he is forced to endlessly clean like a robot. Ash called out to Evangeline and told her to move aside. Then he turned to Jupiter and Damien and ordered them to aim for the right hand. Jupiter and Damien struck together and Bienbulak's arm separated from the main body and fell to the ground. He said that he would have invented cleaning magic in the first place to make life easier for his colleagues. As he spoke, the team members continued to throw punches, hitting his cores directly. In the end, having lost all its limbs, the golem fell to the ground and a roar was heard. Lucas climbed onto his body and walked over to where the core was. Then he pointed the tip of the sword down and stabbed it into the golem's body, delivering a deep blow that reached the core on the chest. After that, he reported that they destroyed the mana core in the chest. Now only the head remains. Suddenly the monster began to rise and Lucas grabbed onto its body with his sword so as not to fall. The core on the monster's head sparkled, and he said that it was strange. Where does all this garbage come from? Bienbulak began to hit his head on the floor, and Ash thought, now he will hit his head? He went completely crazy. He gritted his teeth and looked at Jupiter and Damien who were behind him, thinking that he was just in command, so he could easily dodge, but the two of them couldn't. He gathered all his determination and courage, turning towards the golem, and then clenched his hand into a fist and ran to the attack, shouting that he just wanted to quietly laze around. The power of his attack was 125 units, and then he hit the golem on the head, which slightly threw him up and left a dent. The golem's head, along with its body, fell to the ground, and after that it did not move. Ash caught his breath and thought that it was good that the damage was good, otherwise it would have been bad. The core on Bienbulak's head sparkled and cracked, and then he felt something inside. While he was lying on the ground, his gaze rushed upward and he saw drops falling down. He felt drops of rain hitting his steel body and said that it was raining. Lucas presented Ash with a sword and said that he must finish him off. Ash thanked him and thought that they give a lot of experience for finishing off the boss. He climbed onto his head and approached the core, thinking that he had just the lowest level. He pointed the tip of his sword at the core and thought that he should just kill it. Bienbulak still felt the raindrops, which only he could see, and said that it was such a pleasant shower. Ash indifferently called him a monster and ordered him to shut up. After that, he delivered the final blow and the system reported that the boss's room had been cleared. Giant mechanical golem scavenger Bienbulak level 20 destroyed. He was able to destroy all parts of the golem. After that, all the team members scattered around the room, examining the wreckage, and Ash looked through the system window and thought that he had received a bonus for complete destruction. It's also a good experience. How many levels will he raise? Damien called out to him with a smile and said that there was a path and a treasure chest. Ash waved and replied that he was on his way, and then he called out to Lucas and told him to hold her. Lucas began to hold Jupiter, and she screamed, "She can't even look?" Ash ignored her and opened the chest, saying in surprise that it was an SR item. What is it? He took a level 30 blue glowing scream orb. This is a magical sphere that deals from 40 to 45 units of damage, and has a durability of 15. When destroying several enemies in a row with an interval of no more than 30 seconds, a 5% bonus to damage is given. He winced with displeasure and said that it was a magic item. Jupiter was delighted and said that this was such a delight. Is this for her? Ash threw the sphere into her hands and confirmed her words. Lightning began to emanate from the sphere in her hands, and Ash thought that in any case it would only be suitable for her. This sphere was one of 3 items in a set called Shout for Me. When collecting a full set, for each enemy killed, a fear effect is applied to a large area. Ash thought that he would also like to know where to look for the other 2 items. Also in the chest were 2 SR rank mana cores of excellent quality. But overall it's a bit sparse for a boss room. The second zone was cleared. They walked through the massive doors and Ash told the others to go ahead. They look for a checkpoint and go home. Evangelina was delighted, and then the system reported that the second zone of the back street had been cleared. As soon as they walked through the massive doors, Ash stopped and looked up. He saw a spiral staircase going up and asked, Is this a climb to some kind of fortress? He thought that so far everything had gone smoothly. The terrain was familiar. They are on the right track. He smiled and told the others to go ahead, and after that they began to climb the stairs. So some time passed, and they were still rising. Jupiter was very tired and exclaimed, "How far is it yet?" Her knees are about to crumble. She already hears an ominous crunch. Damien, although he was tired, was silent and did not complain. But Ash, who walked in front of them, was drooling from fatigue, and Jupiter answered that it was his knees that were crunching so much. They're almost there. Finally, they climbed the tower and found themselves in a huge hall. Ash, who was still on the stairs, slowly crawled up the steps and said that there was just a little more left, the last push. He thought that he wanted to strangle the one who invented spiral staircases. Jupiter was also barely crawling and said that it seemed like her heart was going to stop soon. She would like to smoke her last cigar before her death. Ash replied that this cigar would most likely kill her. He looked at Lucas and Evangelina, who were walking ahead together, and thought that they didn't care. After much torment, Ash finally found himself in the tower hall and told everyone that they were great. He pointed to the passage leading outside and said that they had done it. There was a lamppost outside the tower, and stones lay nearby. Ash said it was a teleportation gate. Jupiter was the first to run outside and joyfully said that they were going home. Her old bones can no longer stand it. When she returns, she will immediately climb into the hot bath. Alcohol with ice in one hand, cigar in the other. But suddenly she lost all her joy and stopped when she saw the view opening from above. Ash, along with the others, approached her and asked why she was frozen. Everyone else also came to the edge and looked down in surprise. Ash looked at the view from here and said that this is what the kingdom under the lake actually looks like. It is simply immense. From the height of the tower, the entire kingdom was visible, in which rare blue lights were burning. And in the very center of the city there was a huge high castle, and at the very top a bright light shone. Damien was surprised to see a light on top of the castle and said that there was light in the kingdom. He spoke not only about the castle, but also about the whole city, so that it was dotted with blue lights. Ash thought that this was not entirely true. It's just that someone installed magical stones of light throughout the city and in the central tower. Thanks to this, few travelers can find their way around here. Evangelina pointed towards the castle and asked, "What is this? Is this some kind of lighthouse?" Ash frowned at the tower, and after a short pause he replied that it was the central tower of the palace. He thought that this was the last zone they should go to, and that it was there that they would have to fight the final boss. If only they knew how long he actually dragged himself there. Now they were on the very outskirts of the kingdom, in the third zone, on the northern wall of the castle. They entered through the sewers, wandered through the back streets, and eventually came out on the wall of the northern gate of the city. He activated the teleport and called out to the others, saying that they would think about the further route next time. It's time for them to go home. He will think that just a little more, and they will carry him in their arms. The system reported that free research was completed. He can choose 2 available rewards. Group status. Ash went up 4 levels, now he's 15. Lucas went up 2 levels, now he's 33. Jupiter went up 1, now she's level 38. Damien went up 3 levels and is now 27. Guest party member Evangelina went up 1 level and now has 36.